Why is it that as horror fans we're constantly seeking out ways to punish ourselves? We're always looking for the newest bit of horror media to terrify us, mortify us, and scar us beyond belief, and we love every second of it. So I'm Amy from What Culture, and here are 10 horror video games that brutally punish you. 10. Resident Evil. Rebecca Chambers has a unique place in the hearts of every Resident Evil fan. Whilst her role in the first game was fairly minimal, this STARS team member managed to capture us big time. Of course, Rebecca would get to take full centre stage later on, but her role in the original Resident Evil was a wake-up for players in regards to what the stakes of Resident Evil were. When playing as Chris Redfield, you got to cross paths with Rebecca, and you'd later be given a task that was unknowingly time-sensitive. After hearing the distant screams of this youngster, as Chris, you're meant to try and find and rescue her from whatever sinister threat is traumatizing her. That threat would be an alpha hunter, and players and Rebecca would be punished should Chris decide to take his sweet time in responding to those screams. Take too long to come to Rebecca's aid and you'll see her bite the bullet. In the original, having her head swiped off, or in the remake, having her throat slit. Either way, if you pull your finger out and manage to get to Rebecca in a timely fashion, then you'll save her from being killed off, even if just temporarily. 9. Until Dawn. Until Dawn has the opportunity, and definitely takes it, to punish you around every corner. Every time you think you're in the safe zone, you're really not. For fans of classic slasher movies, Supermassive Games' 2015 release ticked a plethora of the right boxes. It was atmospheric, fantastically cliched, and had a genuinely engaging plot. And it of course had twists and turns aplenty. The thing is, no matter how well you think you're doing in Until Dawn, 1 millisecond of lost concentration or hesitation can cost you dearly. Admittedly, that's all part of the beauty of the game. Every playthrough is unique and every revisited scenario offers a multitude of possibilities. Until Dawn will punish a player in the most brutal of ways for having the most brief of slip-ups or indecision. Even right as you think you've got to the end doing absolutely fantastically, just a split second of hesitation can cause Hayden Panettiere's Sam to be torn apart by a Wendigo, for example. Even when you're in the final few minutes of the game, you can still lose worse than you thought you could, and I'm speaking from experience. Each individual scenario in Until Dawn has a brutal punishment tied to it, but it's actually the overall experience of the consequences that matter more than each individual big scare. 8. Alien Isolation. It's proven a tough task so far to deliver a masterful Alien video game over the decades, but Creative Assembly's Alien Isolation did a phenomenal job of capturing the claustrophobia and sheer dread of the IP when it was finally let out into the world in late 2014. Because the game captures that claustrophobic terror so well though, it's nothing if not instinctive for a player to seek a safe hiding spot for any time you think a xenomorph is nearby. However, choose to snuggle up to the warm familiarity of safety for too long and you are going to regret it. If you think that the best plan in Isolation is to hide out and wait for a xenomorph to quietly shuffle off and do its own xenomorph thing elsewhere, you are gravely mistaken. Instead, the longer you stay hidden, the greater the chance of the acid-blooded creature successfully hunting you down. It's the ultimate stick or twist conundrum of holding onto your proverbial safety blanket or making a break for it in the hope that your movements don't lead you directly to the very thing you're trying to avoid. To paraphrase Liam Neeson, the xenomorph will look for you, it will find you, and it will absolutely destroy you. 7. Slender The Arrival. When Blue Island Studios spun their free viral Slender the 8 Pages into Slender The Arrival in 2013, many were eager to have the video game scares put up them by the Slender Man in all his ghoulish glory. The game itself was somewhat of a mixed bag. We were maybe expecting a little too much of it, but I'm not saying it was a tragic endeavour. Its reliance on creepy atmosphere was relatively fresh in 2013, yet painfully dated when revisited today. Still, one thing that Slender The Arrival most certainly did in spades is punish players brutally for trying to take the easy way out. In the game, your player Lauren is destined to die regardless of how successful she is in her mission to find the missing pal, Kate. If you don't find Kate, you unfortunately die, but if you do find Kate, lucky you, you'll be joining her in the afterlife. Where this release gets particularly brutal or extremely smart is how it deals with the would-be cheaters. Some people were able to glitch out of the borders of the game's map in order to avoid old Slendy and his chums, and for those who attempted to cheat the Arrival, they'd fall to their death and be greeted by a mocking message from Slenderman himself. 6. Maid of Skur. From Wales Interactive, last year's Maid of Skur is a beautiful, haunting first-person survival horror that embraces Welsh folklore. Set in 1898, you take control of the musician Thomas Evans, who arrives at Skur House on the Welsh coast as he looks for his one true love, Elizabeth Williams. With supernatural shenanigans at play and a nice dose of torture and torment, the initial threats of Maid of Skur are the quiet ones. These shuffling sorts are a gamer's worst nightmare, able to hone in on any small sound you make whilst navigating the house. Just when you think you've mastered the stealth element of this game, you'll be slapped back down to earth by a stumbled step, a creaky door hinge, a bullet fired, or an unfortunate collision with a reception bell, all of which will result in a swarm of quiet ones circling in on you and beating you to death. It's with this false sense of security that the game really excels. It draws you in, makes you feel all cozy, wraps a blanket around you, and then rips it off and suffocates you with it. Yeah, and that's all even before you get to the crossroads of the game's final act. 5. Silent Hill 2. For horror gamers, a mere whiff of a new Silent Hill game even being a possibility is enough to get them giddy with twisted excitement. It may be approaching 10 years since the last proper Silent Hill offering, but fans are just as hungry now, if not more so, for this franchise to rear its head once more. When pondering why the Silent Hill franchise is still so lauded to this day, there's no need to look any further than Silent Hill 2. To some, this is the absolute pinnacle of the franchise, encapsulating so much of what makes the Silent Hill name and concept so special. As is par for the course with Silent Hill offerings, Silent Hill 2's ending is impacted by variables that the player is initially unaware of. When it comes to brutal, shocking finales, one scenario in this sequel release sees lead protagonist James Sunderland commit suicide. This finale for Silent Hill 2 rewards players by having James drive his car into Toluca Lake, resulting in suicide via drowning. It's a really jarring way to end the game and can be brought on by a number of things, including letting James's health be too low for too long, looking for Angela's knife, and reading Mary's letter. 4. House of Velez. In the simplest of terms, this game will you up. Released in 2017, this Darkroom Games effort may not feature the most impressive of graphics at play, but it's a game that features some ridiculously brutal punishments for messing up. House of Velez sees you take control of Lily Velez, the daughter of an archaeologist who returns to the family home in order to find her missing father. Soon finding herself in way over her head, Lily has to deal with the uncomfortable truths, shocking revelations, and a fight for her life. The game itself is very much a methodical one based around stealth, puzzles, and just generally taking things very slowly, very measuredly, and very carefully. But when the game does kick into gear during any and all times Lily gets caught and offed, it's an extremely gruesome fate that awaits her. Here, Lily can be killed in a ludicrous amount of stomach-churning ways, and there are even certain deaths where after her death her corpse can be further desiccated. Delightful. 3. Man of Medan. If you are a fan of Until Dawn, Man of Medan is worth trying next. Depending on which fan you talk to, some liked it more, some liked it less, me being the latter, but I'm not saying it's a bad game. In fact, it is incredibly brutal. What makes one of Man of Medan's potential punishments even more painful is how the game lets you think for so long that things are fine. During the early part of the game, there's a pressure moment of whether Julia should take her time or go hell for leather when heading back to the surface during the dive segment. With an explosion having just happened, it's understandable that some players might want to opt to get Julia out of the water as soon as possible. And if you do this, you'll be led to think that your decision was actually no big deal. From there, you can play through the rest of the entire game, keep all core characters alive, see the closing credits roll, and even get a farewell from the curator. But still, there's one final shock left around the corner for Man of Medan. For those of you who chose to rush to the surface during the dive section, you'll only see after the credits roll the consequences of your action, which consist of Julia collapsing and then dying from decompression sickness, aka the bends. It's all a direct, if not incredibly delayed, result of what took place so much earlier in the game, and the fact that you were otherwise led to think that you did a-okay is really very brutal. 2. Resident Evil 4. You could likely make a case to include numerous scenarios from the Resident Evil franchise here, but we're capping it at 2. We've previously mentioned Resident Evil 2, and now it's time for Resident Evil 4 and Luis Serra. For the most part, Luis is on screen to accompany Leon and act the fool. He's an extremely smart fella who's responsible for some of the most monstrous beasts that you see dotted through Resident Evil 4, proving that he's capable of some impressive, if not questionable, feats. One such feat can be found out the hard way, and that is that Louis Sira will happily kill you if you dick around with him too much. During the missions that he's by your side, if you let him get hit 3 or more times, he'll throw his toys out the pram. For Resident Evil 4 players, that means that he'll turn around and shoot you dead, sending you to the game over screen and giving you an even bigger urge to start unloading your gun or a few choice grenades into his direction once you're back in. 1. Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem completely and utterly messes with your head if you make the unfortunate error of allowing your sanity to drop too low. If you let this happen, which in fairness is near impossible not to near the end of the game, it'll start warping what you can see. At times, this distorted reality can be something relatively mild, such as statues' heads turning to follow your movements or blood may begin to drop down the walls. Other times though, this can take a slightly more messed up turn, with your character dying or having limbs blown off. Likely the most headache-inducing parts of Eternal Darkness's patented sanity effects relate to your actual TV screen and GameCube. So intent on f***ing with you is this game that it will have you convinced that your TV is turned off, that your controller has been disconnected, that your save file has been deleted and that the game has been reset, or even that your GameCube has experienced the infamous fist-gnawing blue screen of death that we all dread. So yeah, for your own sake, if you ever decide to give this game a go, try to keep your sanity in good check, you won't regret it. And with that, we've reached the end of this list of 10 horror video games that brutally punish you. If you can think of any more, then drop them in the comments down below. And remember to check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. As always, I've been Amy from What Culture, and I'll catch you next time.